Yes, this is going to be recorded.
Very good. All right, so welcome back, everyone. so, let's start with the second lecture. It's a very interesting one. This lecture we will talk about the circadian cycle, sleep, and consciousness. It's a big topic, sleep. Okay, it's a very big topic. It's a big field. Consciousness is a big word as well. So we'll try to, give you a glimpse into these areas. Okay. So this lecture will be divided into three parts. The first part will talk about the circadian cycle. The second part will talk about sleep, different stages of sleep, the physiological changes and the EEG characteristics. We'll talk about the neural circuits that regulate the different stages of sleep or sleep and wakefulness. And finally, we'll briefly talk about consciousness. Okay. So let's start with the circadian cycle. So as we know that many of our physiological behavior is regulated by the day and night cycle, which results from the rotation of the Earth around itself. Okay, so our physiological behavior is regulated by this periodicity of the day and night. And so this is called the circadian cycle. We know that we tend to sleep, sleep is maybe, has to be done, when we are during night. Okay, so during night we sleep. There is, also this is accompanied by reduction of our body temperature, during night, release of growth hormones, levels of, cortisol also, change when we are asleep. Urine output, fluctuate as well. So there is this, link between our physiology and the day and night cycle. And so a question come to the mind is whether these physiological behaviors are actually regulated by astronomy, or is it internal? And so to answer this question, there has been, experiments that was done where individuals were kept isolated. Okay, so you can see here. So we know that a typical cycle is 24-hour cycle. The blue is when we are awake, and red is when we are, asleep. Okay, so each line here represents the hours we spent awake, and red is, represent sleeping hours. So these individuals in the experiment, so here is with the cues that tells them whether it's day or night. Okay, and here the middle part is when these cues that tells them that this is a day or night have been removed. Okay, and as you can see that although the cycle is slightly shifted, okay, however the duration of the cycle itself remained slightly changed, but remained within 24 to around 26 hours. Okay, and so this indicated basically that we have an internal clock, okay, which operates even in the absence of external information that tells us whether it's day or night. Okay, and so this internal clock has been found to be located in the hypothalamus. So this is the hypothalamus, and it's believed that the suprachiasmatic nuclei here located in the hypothalamus. This nuclei serves as the biological clock, and its job is to coordinate the rhythmicity of our physical activity with the light-dark cycles, okay, to synchronize our physiology with the changes to the day and night. And so this clock, okay, must have access to information, outside information, whether it is a day or night. And so it is believed that what provides this information, whether it's day or night, is retinal cells. So these are in the retina. They are not the rods or cones. These are specialized cells which are known to produce photopigment called melanopsin. Okay, so these basically, these neurons communicate. So this is the here we have the retinal cells, okay, which will be communicating with the suprachiasmatic nuclei via the retino-hypothalamic tract, okay. And so in this way, the suprachiasmatic nuclei will be informed whether it's day or night. So what happens is that in the absence of light, okay, in the absence of light, these suprachiasmatic nuclei would communicate, okay, so here, so this here we have the suprachiasmatic nuclei, where it will be communicating with a paraventricular nuclei. Here we have neurons in this nuclei, which will send, so this blue here, will basically go all the way, okay, to synapse with a you know, with a sympathetic neurons, which will be innervating the pineal gland, okay. So these pineal gland, as you probably know, they synthesize melatonin. And so by basically through the suprachiasmatic nuclei, activation of the preganglionic sympathetic neurons, which will be communicating with a post ganglionic sympathetic neurons, will be innervating the which will be innervating the pineal gland to induce the synthesis and release of melatonin. Okay, so this is during night. However, during the day, this the suprachiasmatic nuclei also includes GABAergic neurons, which will be basically inhibiting this innervation of the pineal gland, thus will stop the you know, synthesis and release of melatonin during the day. So melatonin is mainly synthesis and release increases as light from the environment decreases. And so melatonin helps in initiate and maintain sleep. However, the precise rule of how it does so is not very clear. But one way that melatonin works is that by you know, acting on its receptors on the suprachiasmatic nuclei. So these, the internal clock has receptors for melatonin. And so by acting on its receptors there, it will reset the clock. Okay, so this is the how the, you know, the our internal clock work. So let's talk about sleep. Okay, so sleep is a very big field, and as we know that sleep is very important. And has been defined behaviorally as normal suspension of consciousness. Okay, so as when we are asleep, we lose you know, consciousness. Okay, which is normal suspension. When we are asleep, it doesn't mean that our brain stops working. It's actually our brain is as active when we are awake, okay? So sleep is not the result of simple diminution of brain activity. So still the brain would be active when we are asleep. It's just different activity, as we'll see in a second. And so sleep is a series of precisely controlled physiological states, as we will learn, which, sleep consists of multiple cycles. Each cycle consists of multiple stages. And so there are group of brainstem nuclei, which are known to be responsible for the status of wakefulness and, sleep, as we'll see in a second. Most adults require 7 to 8 hours of sleep. So you can see here that infants and babies require, so this is hours in the day, okay? So you can see, so this is age 1 year. They require, much hours, of sleep than adults. So this is 20 years of age. We require around 7 to 8 hours. And as we age, the amount of time, required for sleep gets less, okay? Now, as we said, that sleep is mainly consist of cycles. So this is a typical 7 to 8 hour duration of sleep. And this 8 hour of sleep consists of around 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cycles. So each of these are cycles. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we have 6 cycles alternating. Now, each of these cycles consist of stages, okay? So if we take one cycle here and zoom in, so this is one cycle of sleep. So one cycle of sleep, is typically around, it takes around 1 hour, 60 minutes or so. And so each cycle consists of 5 stages. The first 4 stages here are called the non-rapid eye movement stages. Okay, so these are non-REM. Okay, and the 5th stage here is called the REM stage of sleep. And so as you can see here, this is when we are awake. Okay, and then when we try, when when sleep is being induced, we go into stage 1, which is drowsiness. Okay, so this is stage 1. Then we spend around 10 minutes in this stage. Then we transition into stage 2, which is more of a light sleep stage. Okay, then from stage 2, we transition into stage 3, okay, which is deep sleep. And then from stage 3, we go into stage 4, which is the very deep stage of sleep. And then we transition into the REM stage of sleep, this is the stage where we experience dreaming, okay? So stage 4 here, the very deep stage of sleep, is usually it's very difficult to awake individuals in this stage. And when individuals wake up in this very deep stage of sleep, they usually, wake up very tired. However, in the REM stage of sleep is where we experience dreaming, okay? Now, as we progress through the night, if you noticed that the amount of time we spend in the REM stage gets, larger, okay? And the amount of time we spend in the stage 4 gets, shorter, okay? As we progress, throughout the stage, through our sleep. Now, each of these stages are characterized with a behavioral, physiological behavioral changes. So in the non-REM stages of sleep, stage 1 to 4, we basically have a reduction in the muscle tone. Okay, as you can see here, the muscles, so get the muscle tone gets reduced as we go from stage 1 to stage 4. There is also gradual reduction in the heart rate, in the respiration rate, as well as metabolic rate, etc., and temperature because of the higher activation of the parasympathetic autonomic nervous system. Okay, and the REM stage of sleep, which we said this is the stage where we experience dreaming. We get increased blood pressure in this stage. The heart rate, as you can see, the heart rate, increases. We have increased, respiration, also metabolism. We also, this is why it's called rapid eye movement, because our eyes move, okay? There is also characterized by pupillary constriction. Also, the REM stage, this is very important, is characterized by paralysis of the large muscle groups, okay? Except for, like the the diaphragm and other muscles used for breathing. Obviously, they wouldn't be paralyzed, but the other large muscles would be. Otherwise, this will be dangerous as we'll start acting on our dreams, okay? So these are the different physiological behavioral changes that happens during the non-REM versus the REM stage. Now with the EEG patterns, okay, let me go back to this slide. So when we are awake, if you guys remember that the waves that are more prominent when we are awake is the alpha and beta waves, okay, which has higher frequency. So these are mainly prominent when we are awake. As we transition into the stage 1 non-REM, this changes into the theta waves, okay? And as we transition into stage 2, we still get the theta waves, which has, less frequency, and we start to see the sleep spindles, which are brief periodic bursting activities, and as well as K complexes, as I'll show you in a second. And as we transition into the stage 3 of the non-REM, we start to get the delta waves, which has the higher amplitude and lower frequency. And this is very clear in the very deep stage of sleep, where we very clearly start to see the delta waves, okay? Very interestingly, when we go to the REM stage of sleep, subhanallah, we start getting the the beta waves, okay? So basically, when we are in the REM sleep, the EEG waves is very similar to when we are awake, okay? So this is just, what I explained. So when we are awake, we get the alpha, beta, gamma rhythms. Okay, when we are in the REM sleep, we experience similar to when we are awake, we get the beta and gamma rhythms. However, in the non-REM stages of sleep, so with the stage 1 and 2, we have the theta waves, and stage 2 is, in particular, is characterized by the sleep spindles, which are very brief periodic bursting, or K complexes here, which have, you know, like a biphasic type of wave. Okay, so this is the K complex. In the stage 3 and 4, we start to see the delta rhythms, which have high amplitude and lower frequency. Okay. Now, why we sleep? Okay, sleep serves many functions. There are multiple hypotheses. One hypothesis suggests that sleep is very important for energy conservation, where when we are asleep, the brain gets refilled with glycogen, restore our energy, our fuel, and we also have reduced temperature. Okay, so we are on the energy saving mode. Also, when we are asleep, this facilitates memory consolidation, where synaptic connections get strengthened when we are asleep. Brain restoration, where a lot of the waste clearance happens when we are asleep. And sleep is very important. This is, we all know it, for successful behavior and even survival. As a student, if you didn't get enough sleep, you won't be able to perform very well in your tests. You will be more prone, like as a worker, if you don't get enough sleep, you will be more prone for, depression, being negative, less energetic. We all know this, okay? So sleep is very important, even for survival. And animals, this is very interesting, deep in the sea, they do sleep, but in a very interesting way, as we know that the brain have the cortex, the cerebral, we have two hemispheres of the cerebral cortex, two hemispheres. And so, for example, in dolphins, we know that each hemisphere alternate with the sleeping. So you can see this wave is the left hemisphere is awake, and while the right hemisphere is undergoing sleep. So each half alternate in the sleeping mode. Okay, very interesting. Now, let's see. Okay, so what is sleep spindle? Okay, so before we go, sleep spindle is basically, so sleep spindle is this brief, so you can see brief periodic bursting activities where it's bursting. Okay, so just very brief and periodic. Okay, so these are mainly found in EEG waves during stage 2 of the non-REM sleep. Okay. Now let's talk about the neural circuits that govern wake and sleep. And the earliest experiments were done by these scientists in 1949. Okay, what they did, they basically, by electrically stimulating nuclei here in the at the junction of the midbrain and bones, okay, they found that by electrically stimulating these areas, okay, which are known to be cholinergic, this promote wakefulness, okay, and later they learned that there are other neurons or nuclei that also promote wakefulness. So we have the cholinergic nuclei, which was the first to be discovered to be involved in wakefulness. These are located at the junction between the midbrain and the brainstem, at the midbrain and the bones, sorry. And there are other nuclei like the noradrenergic locus coralis here in the brainstem, okay, There is also the serotonergic RAF nuclei, and there are also other structures in the hypothalamus. We have the histamine-containing neurons, and we have the hypocretin or orexin and containing neurons in the hypothalamus. So these structures have been called the reticular activating system, and these structures are known to promote wakefulness, not sleep, wakefulness, okay? So neurons of the cholinergic nuclei, noradrenergic neurons of the locus coeruleus, the serotonergic neurons of the RAF nuclei, histamine-containing neurons, okay, in the hypothalamus, and neurons in the hypothalamus that use hypothalamus or also called orexin in the hypothalamus. So these neurons are known to promote wakefulness. And so they do so by basically, we have these, nuclei in the brainstem, which we mentioned, the cholinergic neurons, the noradrenergic, the RAF nuclei, the serotonergic, mediating these nuclei in the brainstem is the histamine-containing neurons in the hypothalamus. And this mediation usually is known to promote wakefulness. And so this is why antihistamines induce drowsiness, because they act on these cells, okay? Now, the histamine-containing neurons also, so histamine-containing neurons, are either regulated by the orexin neurons in the hypothalamus, which we also said to promote wakefulness. So these orexin neurons, by communicating or modulating the histamine-containing neurons and the group of nuclei in the brain stem, okay? So by communicating with those is known to promote wakefulness. However, there is the ventrolateral preoptic nucleus in the hypothalamus. These play an inhibitory effect on the histamine-containing neurons and the brainstem nuclei, which are part of the reticular activating system. By executing their inhibitory effect, they are known to promote sleep. Okay, and so this is why a lesion in this site in the ventrolateral preoptic nucleus induces insomnia, okay, where people experience the inability or uneasiness to go to sleep, okay? So this table is very nice table as summarizes things for you. So this is wakefulness, okay? And so wakefulness, when we are awake, this is facilitated by activation of the cholinergic neurons and the bones midbrain junction, activation of the locus coeruleus, the RAF nuclei, the histamine-containing neurons in the hypothalamus, and the orexin-containing neurons in the hypothalamus. So both activation of the cholinergic and aminergic neurons, okay, is required for promotion of wakefulness. Now, with the non-REM sleep, there tend to be a decrease in the activation of the reticular activating system in the brainstem, as you can see. In the REM sleep, however, we do get an activation of the serotonergic and the noradrenergic neurons in the brainstem. But interestingly, as we will learn in a second, there is an activation of the cholinergic neurons in the bones midbrain junction, which is very interesting. So this is the main difference here. What characterizes the REM sleep is that there is activation of the cholinergic neurons. Now, what will happen is that these the reticular activating system will project to the thalamus, okay? And from the thalamus, you know, the thalamocortical neurons will project to communicate with the cortical neurons, okay? So what is the role of the thalamocortical neurons in the non-REM stages of sleep? We know that these thalamocortical neurons, as we learned in the EEG signal, in the EEG lecture, that these are the main contributor to the EEG signal, right? And we know that these thalamocortical neurons can exist either in two states in terms of their activity. They can be either producing bursting activity, having a profile of bursting activity, as you can see here, or they can be tonically active, where the activity is very high. Now, when we are awake, okay, when we are awake, these thalamocortical neurons we have the, what we said, what promote wakefulness is the cholinergic, the noradrenergic, and serotonergic neurons or histamine containing neurons. These are known to promote wakefulness. So when we are awake, we have activations of these neurons. And these, what they will do is that they will switch on the tonic activity of the thalamocortical neurons, okay? So as you can see that these thalamocortical neurons are tonically active. And so when they are tonically active, they will be communicating with the cortical pyramidal neurons. And so they will basically, facilitate the facilitate the transmission of the signals coming from the periphery, okay, like the sensory neurons, from the sensory neurons, etc. What's happening, okay? So this is why they are tonically active, and the absence of the activation of the reticular activating system, we have these thalamocortical neurons switching to the bursting activity mode, where they are, being activated in a synchronous way, as you can see here. And this switch, during, while the tonic, while the thalamocortical neurons are switching from the tonic activity into the bursting activity, is believed to be this is why we see the sleep spindles. This indicate that the thalamocortical neurons are undergoing switching into the bursting activity. And as we learned that the reticular cells, okay, as we learned this in the EEG lecture, that these are GABAergic neurons, and they would release GABA in a bursting way, okay, in a synchronous way, and this will help in the stabilization of the bursting activity of the thalamocortical neurons, okay? And so this is why in the very deep stage of sleep, we see the delta waves, right? If you remember this from the EEG lecture, that the larger the amplitude, it means that the more synchronous or the more synchronized is the activities of the thalamocortical neurons, right? And so this indicates that these thalamocortical neurons are being synchronized in terms of their communication with the pyramidal neurons. And this is how EEG detect this as large waves as the delta waves, okay? Hope this is very clear. Now, this was on what we talked about is the non-REM stage of sleep. However, with the REM sleep, stage of sleep, we said that the activities, you know, the EEG waves, okay, is very similar to when we are awake, which is characterized by the beta and gamma rhythms, right? And so this explains why we have activation of the, okay. So this is why we have high activation of the cholinergic neurons in the brain stem during our REM sleep stage, okay? And the difference between when we are awake or when we are in the REM stage is that the source of information, okay? The source of information when we are awake is external, okay? Whereas when we are experiencing the REM sleep, the source of information is internal. What do we mean by internal is that studies done you know, in sleeping individuals who are experiencing REM sleep indicate that there is a huge activities coming from the extrastriata cortex, which surrounds the primary visual cortex. So here we have the primary visual cortex, and you can see this is inactive, right? However, there is a huge activities indicated by the red here, and the extrastriata activity, which support, you know, the primary visual cortex. And this means that there are a lot of images being created internally. Okay, so the source is not external, internally, and these images are not being interpreted as there is, you know, low activation of the you know, like the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex is not active, okay, it's blue during REM sleep. And so this means that a lot of these images are left uninterpreted, and the emotions that we get when we are dreaming is believed to be mediated by activation of the limbic areas like the anterior cingulate cortex, the amygdala, the para-hippocampal gyrus. Okay, so we have a lot of activations in these limbic areas, which explains the emotional component of our dreams. Okay, so this is you know, explains that dreams are basically internally generated images which are left uninterpreted. Okay, and they are, you know, similar to hallucinations, but in a different way, and they have an emotional component. Okay, so these are hypotheses and still, you know, not, you know, still under studies and investigations, but this is what we know at this stage. Okay. Now, when we are experiencing the rapid eye movement, you know, a stage of sleep, we said that we have large muscles paralysis, right? Paralysis of the large muscles. Otherwise, this would be dangerous as we would be acting in our dreams. And we know that some individuals, okay, experience walking when they are asleep. This is not during the REM stage of sleep. This is normal, but this is not during the REM stage of sleep usually. Okay, so just to you know, highlight this. So when we are experiencing the REM stage of sleep, we experience the paralysis of large muscles, and this believed to be facilitated by neurons located in the subcortical complex. So these neurons are glutamatergic, and they communicate with neurons in the medulla to inhibit, so these neurons inhibitory, so by exciting the inhibitory to inhibit the motor neurons innervating our large muscles. Okay, so this is called REM atonia. Okay, and so disturbance in the a lesion in the subcorallus complex, which is the glutamatergic neurons. Lesion in this site would, induce REM sleep behavior and disorder, where these individuals experience, movement of their muscles when they are asleep. So they move their legs and hands, which can be disturbing for their, sleep. Now, imagine that this circuit gets activated when we are awake, okay? And this is on the, the opposite extreme, where, you get the REM atonia when we are, when the individual is awake. And so this condition is called cataplexy, okay? And this is believed to be, the cause of this is because of the loss of the inhibition of the circuit that mediate REM atonia, okay, which we said lie in the brainstem. So this is the circuit that, facilitate REM atonia. So when there is an inhibition of the, there is a loss of the inhibition of the circuits. When we are awake, strong emotions can induce the REM atonia when we are awake, okay? And as we learned that orexin and hypocretin containing neurons in the hypothalamus, they are known to promote wakefulness, right? And so when there is lesion in this site and there is less inhibition on the circuit that mediate REM atonia, when the individuals who have cataplexy experience sudden emotions, this would lead to activation of this circuit, and they would, experience, paralysis of their large muscles. And here is a video of a poor lady who's experiencing the REM atonia when she is awake. Okay, so let's see. Source of information for non-REM sleep is external. How can that be? The source of information for non-REM sleep is not external. Okay. It's here in the middle. So this is the non-REM sleep. This is when we are awake. Okay. So when we are in the non-REM sleep, there is the suspension of consciousness, as we learned. Which is normal. In the awaking, so this slide shows mainly highlighting the difference between the REM sleep, okay, and when we are awake, because as we learned that the activities of the brain when we are awake, especially the EEG signal, is very similar when we are in the REM stage of sleep. So this is comparing when we are awake to when we are experiencing the REM stage of sleep, where we get all the dreaming in the REM stage, okay? The source of information when we are awake is mainly external, okay? So coming from outside of our body, responding to, to the sensory, stimuli around us, okay? When we are experiencing REM, mainly the images being created and sensory information, the source is mainly, internal. Okay, and this is supported by the imaging studies showing the activation of the extrastriatal cortex, supporting that the source of information is being created internally. Okay. Okay, very good. Now let's move on. So we learned about sleep. Okay, sorry. Okay, so we learned about sleep, but we haven't talked about what endogenous factors which are known to promote sleep. So one of the factors that is known to promote sleep is adenosine, which is abundant in our brain. As we know that adenosine is a precursor to make, for DNA, RNA, for, making ATP, etc., right? And adenosine is known to has an inhibitory effect on the modulatory systems, the reticular activating system, okay, for the cholinergic, noradrenergic, and serotonergic neurons, okay. And so adenosine is known to promote sleep, as we know that these circuits are known to promote wakefulness by having an inhibitory effect on these circuits. Adenosine is known to promote sleep. And this is how caffeine works. Caffeine is mainly known to be an antagonist of the adenosine receptors, okay? And so this is how it promotes wakefulness, right? Now, there is another factor, which is nitric oxide, and we know this is a potent gas which can cross the neurons very easily, and it's used for communication and promotes sleep, known to promote sleep by triggering the release of adenosine, which we know that promote sleep. Now, other factors like cytokines, which are synthesized by the microglial cells in our brain. These interleukin, for example, an example is the interleukin 1, is known to promote sleep. And as we know, individuals who are sick usually tend to be very tired and, drowsy. And it's believed to be this is the case because of the release of cytokines, which for some sort of mechanism still under study is known to promote sleep. Melatonin, as we learned, initiates and maintains sleep, but still its precise role of how it does so is not very clear. Okay, so there is a lot of potential for study and investigations, as still many things are still not known. Now, on the second part of the lecture is consciousness, and consciousness is very big word. There is a lot of philosophy involved, but as we know that generally science and neuroscientists tend to be materialistics in their attitudes and views towards things, including consciousness, right? And so consciousness can be interpreted in two ways, okay, by neuroscientists. It can be either, defined as wakefulness, being awake, or it can be consciousness, being aware of oneself, okay, that I exist, okay, which is very difficult, to prove, but can be also, it means being aware of others. And so this is how you respond to your environment. Okay, so either wakefulness, so it's consciousness can be defined as wakefulness and awareness. And so if we take consciousness as wakefulness, okay, wakefulness means being, it's the state of arousal, which can be assessed, by having, individuals have their eyes opened, or, they respond, like they are hearing is intact. Okay, so this means that they are awake. Okay, these are signs of an individual being awake. And as we learned, that the state of being awake or wakefulness is mediated by the reticular activating system, which we explained, previously, which includes, the nuclei in the brainstem, like the cholinergic, the serotonergic, the noradrenergic neurons, as well as the nuclei, the hypothalamus, which are known to promote wakefulness. Now, consciousness, if it's defined as awareness, being having the ability of the individual to respond to external and internal stimuli. Okay, for example, if you follow commands, or follow different stimuli, like they do in the clinic with the neurobehavioral assessment. Okay, so this is how they assess the states of awareness. And so awareness is believed to be mediated or studied, the neuroanatomical circuits that is believed to, give rise to awareness have been inferred by studying patients with disorders of consciousness. Okay, so by doing imaging studies on patients with disorders of consciousness, what have been found is that, what have been inferred is that awareness is mainly mediated by widespread areas of the frontoparietal networks. So basically, as you can see here, we have the disorders of consciousness. So this is the locked-in syndrome, where these individuals, are fully conscious. They are awake, and they are, aware. Okay. Whereas this case here is the minimal consciousness syndrome, where there is partial loss of consciousness in these individuals experiencing. In the vegetative state, these individuals are awake, so they have their eyes opened, but they are not aware. Okay, and we have the coma, where these patients, they are neither aware nor awake, and this is basically brain death. Okay, individuals experience brain death. And as you can see, by taking, doing imaging studies across the spectrum of disorders of consciousness, what being found is that in the locked-in syndrome, there is high activation in the frontoparietal areas, which tend to be decreased in the different, along the spectrum of the disorders of consciousness. And this is how they came to the conclusion that the frontoparietal regions are probably responsible for what we call consciousness. And so there is, in medical settings, they use what's called the Glasgow Coma Scale, which is used to assess the level of consciousness. And this is by testing or scoring, individuals on behaviors like eye-opening response, their verbal response, their motor response. This is how they score the, the level of consciousness. Okay. I think this is the last slide, just showing you how a person who is experiencing brain death, the EEG recording of an individual who is experiencing brain death, where there is complete loss of the EEG waves, okay, as you would expect. Okay, so let's see questions. What is the difference between vegetative state and brain death? So in vegetative state, the individuals are awake, so they are awake. Their eyes are open, hearing, but they don't seem to be aware of their surrounding. Okay, what's the difference? Okay, what happens during a minimal conscious syndrome? So basically, when in MCS, minimal consciousness syndrome, is basically the individual has lost partially consciousness. Okay, I think you will get more, you know, about you know, disorders of consciousness in the clinical lectures, where you know you will get a lot more details on the different conditions and how clinically you can assess them. Okay, can you explain the REM atonia again? Okay, is the brain activity under anesthesia similar to activity during sleep? I don't know. Good question. Very good question. Quite honestly, I'm not sure, but I would really promote you to look it up. It's a very good question. Explain REM atonia. Okay, let's see. Let's go back. So, okay. Okay, REM atonia again. So, so it's believed to induce the paralysis of the large muscles during the REM stage of sleep. Is basically these nuclei which lies in the bones. These are called the subcorallus complex. Okay, so these are glutamatergic excitatory. They would send an axon to a group of nuclei in the medulla to excite an inhibitory neurons, which would send, in turn, these would send an inhibitory axon to inhibit the motor neurons, you know, motor neurons, which would be innervating the large muscles. Okay, so this is very, you know, now this is how the REM atonia executed. Now with the cataplexy, so these individuals, sorry, so these individuals are awake, they are not asleep, okay, and they experience the REM atonia while they are awake. And when they, you know, what is known is that strong emotions, okay, like, you know, strong emotions when we are awake inhibit, okay, through the circuits which mediate wakefulness, inhibit the circuit which mediate, which is known to induce the REM atonia. So these are the subcorallus glutamatergic neurons, which basically communicate with the medulla, neurons in the medulla to inhibit the motor neurons. So this is the motor neuron. So these glutamatergic neurons would be exciting an inhibitory neuron to inhibit the motor neurons, right? So this is the how the REM atonia get executed, okay? And so normal individuals, when we are experiencing strong emotions, okay, through the orexin and hypocretin, you know, containing neurons which are known to promote wakefulness, okay. Also, these would be inhibiting the REM atonia, right? Now, in these individual, it's believed that because of some loss of orexin or hypocretin neurons, there is a loss of the inhibition of the REM atonia. And so when these individuals, as in this case, she is awake, but I think she was laughing or experienced some sort of laughing experience. She underwent REM atonia, and she fell down because her large muscles being paralyzed. So she's experiencing REM atonia during her wakefulness. Okay, I hope this was clear. Okay, any other questions? Okay. What about people who talk and move during sleep? Do they lack REM atonia? No. So mainly walking, what I know is that walking during sleep doesn't happen during REM stage, okay? So this happens maybe during light sleep. I'm not sure. You'll have to look it up. Talking, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But usually REM atonia happens during the REM stage where people experience dreaming. Okay, so this is the end of the lecture. So let's see. Thank you very much, everyone. And I wish you the best in your exams. And inshallah, hopefully we'll see you as very bright, medical doctors in the near future. So study hard and our prayers for you. All the best and see you inshallah, and I'll see you in good health. Okay. Okay. Assalamu alaikum.